welcome to another edition of the Throwing Bagels podcast. Kevin Mooney here with you alongside Jason Hamo. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I am great. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic.
And also with us, as always, Chris Douglas. Hey, Chris.
What's up, Kevin?
Not much. Yourself?
Just, another day in central New York.
Just living the dream.
Living the dream, baby.
Joining us now on the Throwing Bagels podcast, the voice of the Syracuse Mets. It is the director of broadcasting and media relations for Syracuse. It's our pleasure to welcome in Michael Tricarico. Hey, Michael.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
It's great. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to really ramping up here to baseball season. It's right around the corner.
We're about maybe 6 weeks away from opening day for the Syracuse Mets. So plenty of things to go over. I'm sure a lot of roster movement will happen between now and then. That's for sure. But when we look at last year's roster, Michael, so when Syracuse began the season, we were looking at players like Francisco Alvarez and Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, and they all saw time in the majors last year. Who are some of the prospects that we might expect to see on this year's team?
Yeah, I mean, and I think already we've kind of heard some of those names of guys, and most of those names include players that were picked up by the New York Mets last year in those trades that saw some of those high-end pitchers go to other teams. I think the New York Mets did a really good job last year understanding that where they were in the middle of the year wasn't where they wanted to be at the beginning of the season, and they did about as good of a job as possible in getting as much value as they could out of those guys. So I think right at the top you have maybe the two top prospects in the New York Mets organization that are still in the minor leagues, and Luis Angel Acuna and Drew Gilbert. I believe already that we've heard from David Stearns, the director of baseball operations for the New York Mets, that those two will probably be starting the season in Syracuse. So last year we definitely were looking forward to those guys like Francisco Alvarez and Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio all starting last year in Syracuse. And Francisco Alvarez didn't stay in Syracuse for very long. He very quickly, was needed because of injuries in the major leagues. And, he certainly made his presence felt. But what's great is, this Mets organization has done a great job of building up talent in these lower levels. And it'll be really exciting to see, those two guys for sure. I think to see those guys in AAA in Syracuse, see what they can do, being on the cusp and following up what we saw last year from, Beatty and Vientos and Alvarez and Mauricio. And, when a guy like Brett Beatty got up to the major leagues, eventually the production wasn't quite, I think, what others had maybe expected from him, and certainly wasn't what I think Brett was accustomed to. I mean, he was a guy when he was in the minors, I put him at least in players I had seen in the minor leagues, talent wise and production wise, I put him right up there with, I saw firsthand Fernando Tatis Jr. when he was in Single A in the Padres organization. I was with the Fort Wayne Tin Caps, and I saw him firsthand. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, I saw those guys when they were in Single A. I saw those guys in Triple A, and the production and just the way those guys looked. Brett Beatty was in that conversation just in terms of what he was doing in Triple A. So, yes, of course, what ended up happening once he got to the major leagues wasn't, what I think, all of us had expected right away. But with all of those guys, it's hard, it's easy to forget just how young they are. So it's great to see those guys now going to get an opportunity with the New York Mets this season. And now we get to see this next crop of Acuna and Drew Gilbert. And, we'll see after that, where they start guys like Jet Williams and Kevin Parada. But, those are guys, I think, by the end of the season, if they're not in Syracuse at the start of the year or middle of the year, you might see them in AAA by the end of the year. I mean, it's all going to be, the ball's going to be in those guys' courts. So it's very exciting just to have those prospects. But, as when you want your major league team to have success, because who knows, this team could surprise some people. You need to build up some depth, and I think we've seen, as I'm starting to go through a list of possible pitchers that we might see in Syracuse and possible position players, you're kind of looking, going, geez, I don't even know if there's enough spots in Syracuse for some of these guys.
When you mentioned Brett Beatty, last year came up, came back down, came back up again. He was obviously raking when he was in AAA, came back down and he was, hitting the cover off the ball. Was there anything that you heard specifically from him or from the coaching staff, trying to help him out? Was it just the mindset thing, or was it actually like his actual, hitting?
No, I think it's more just mindset and getting used to a new level of baseball. I mean, it's there's a big jump. I think in the minor leagues, the jump from AA to AAA is a really big one. Like I remember when Francisco Alvarez was in Syracuse, he would mention, like, he was talking to Dick Scott, Syracuse's manager last year, and Kevin Bowles, had similar conversations. He was a manager 2 years ago with some guys who were coming up. In AA, if a pitcher falls behind an account 2-0, 3-0, there's probably a good chance he's just going to throw a fastball to try and throw a strike. In AAA, there's pretty much all of the pitchers you get up here, whether they've been in the majors before or are just filling a spot, they can throw any pitch they want in any count for a strike, and that's an adjustment that guys have to make, just going from AA to AAA. So I think going from AAA to the majors, it's an even bigger jump, because when you think about, there's maybe 2, 3, 4 guys on a AAA team that might be at least play big roles in for a major league team going forward. Well, now when you're in the majors, you're facing those top players every single day, day in and out. So I think for Brett, it wasn't anything specific mechanics wise. I mean, I think he certainly was working with the hitting coaches at all of these levels, but at the end of the day, it just came down to needing to get more reps and just needing to adjust to that level of baseball. And I'm not as worried about him or some of the other guys as maybe some other people out there are, because I have all the faith in the world, having seen the work ethic firsthand and just seeing the ability firsthand to know that I think a guy like Brett's going to be able to figure it out. And I think he will surprise some people this year, because I think, I won't speak for everyone out there, but I feel like there have been some people that are writing him off and may have written some other guys off, but the talent's there, and I think he can definitely surprise some people in a big way.
It seems like Mark Vientos is kind of in that same boat, because I mean, I've been to a lot of Syracuse Mets games, and every time I saw him in the lineup, he was knocking the cover off the baseball. So it sounds like it's really just a matter of time for a guy like Mark Vientos to kind of settle in at the major league level.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for a while, even at the beginning of last year, I think it was pretty clear, and I would even say somewhat towards the end of his time in AAA 2 years ago, it was one of those situations where, from an offensive standpoint, I think you talk to coaches, you talk to some scouts, he was more than ready from an offensive standpoint. It was just, is he ready defensively, and where are you going to put him defensively? Do you want to sit him in that DH spot? They obviously have he's gotten some time at third base. He has in AAA gotten some time at first base. And I think coming into this year, the thing I'm most excited about with both Brett and with Mark is that they will have the opportunity. At the end of the day, you don't know what you have unless those guys have the opportunity. So now you're going to be able to see Brett and Mark both play, third base. They might be able to DH here and there. You might be able to have Brett playing at third base, and now Mark's your, everyday DH. You at least have options, I think, which is really good. But those guys, you're going to be able to know. The end of this year, you're going to have an idea. All right, these guys are guys that are going to be a big part of this organization moving forward as everyday players, or it's just not going to work out here, and maybe guys need a different environment. But I think the most excited part is these guys are ready. They've been looking forward to this opportunity, and now they're finally going to get it. And I think that's something that we can all be excited about.
In the past, the Mets have had, throughout the years, some very highly touted pitching prospects. Quite a few haven't panned out as much as people have liked them to have panned out. But they definitely have some high profile or higher profile pitching prospects, it seems like, in the minor leagues right now. Mike Vassell and Christian Scott are two that come to mind. just how good are these two? And are there any other that you may have seen that might be able to make a difference at the major league level as well?
Yeah, I mean that's another interesting part about this year's Syracuse Mets team is that you do have this situation where yes, you're probably again if everybody stays healthy, which hasn't happened the last couple of years. There was 2 years in a row we thought that we would have David Peterson and Tyler McGill as our 1-2 starters in Syracuse, and none of the last 2 years has that happened. One or the other has been up, or both of them have been up in the major league. So this year, if everyone stays healthy, you have a situation where you might have a Syracuse rotation that does have you have Tyler McGill, you have Joey Lucchesi, you do have Mike Vassell, maybe you have Christian Scott, and there's some other guys that they've picked up, whether it's via trade, whether it's signing as free agents in the offseason, that you might have here. In addition, those guys that you have down in Double-A coming up. You mentioned Christian Scott hadn't made it to Triple-A yet. Maybe there's a good chance that he starts the season here. Dominic Hamill is another guy. I think that group, just in talking with some of the Double-A broadcasters and reading some articles about those guys from the offseason, and even just things we had heard last year when that group was taking the Double-A Binghamton Rumble Ponies to the Eastern League Championship Series down in Double-A, that group felt like they were the best pitching staff in Double-A. And I think numbers wise and talent wise, and you check to see what the scouts are saying. There's a lot of people that might agree with that. So we haven't seen, I haven't seen Christian Scott or Dominic Hamill necessarily in person, but I think it's an opportunity for those guys to in spring training, possibly show what they have and push themselves into that AAA rotation to start. Because ultimately you do have other guys in AAA like Jose Budo, who 2 years ago I would have said, okay, maybe this is a guy that could it's at least could fill in at the major league level. And he's had some bumps in the road. Maybe he's a guy, I've talked to some scouts in the past who said they really like him as an option out of the bullpen with some of the ride he gets on his fastball. That velocity that we saw from Budo sometimes gets up at times to 96, 97, 98 miles an hour. So I think this is a big year for guys like that as well, to sort of find their roles in this organization, whether it is as a starting pitcher, whether it is if it is in the bullpen. So I think the depth is there. It's just a matter of figuring things out. So there's a lot of guys I haven't seen. Mike Vassell, of course, was one guy who we did see last year. I think he was maybe one of the more impressive players that we saw here in AAA with Syracuse, with what he was able to put together and just how he was able to get better and better as the year went on. Came close to a no-hitter at one point during the season. So I think he's another name to keep an eye on in terms of someone that has been in AAA before this season and at least could work his way to the point where, hey, New York needs a pitcher. He's one of the names at the top of the list that maybe gets called up.
He probably won't start the season in New York, but there's a decent chance that he could get a call up during the year, depending on what he's doing and injuries and things like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I absolutely think that a guy like Mike Vassell has to get a look. I mean, he has the intangibles. I think there's a lot of people in the organization that are high on what he can do. And it's to that point. I think this is, I think this season is going to be it's one of those, let the guys play and figure out what you have. Like we were talking about with Beatty and Vientos. Unfortunately, Mauricio, isn't part of that group. But I think that happens with guys in AAA as well. The guys like Jose Budo and Tyler McGill, and we'll see what you have with Joey Lucchesi, and now you have Mike Vassell at the top of that list, and Christian Scott and Dominic Hamill, and maybe there's some others as well coming up from Double-A. It's not, maybe you're not pushing those guys as hard to start, but by the end of the season, I think it's definitely going to be, hey, let's see what we have from a lot of these guys in AAA. I think it's going to be, they're going to have the opportunity. And let's see what happens, because I'm a little bit higher on I think what the New York Mets can do than some others. I think they can surprise some people, as we know in this day and age of of baseball with the wild card spots. Sometimes all you have to do is, you win 80, 85 games and you can sneak into one of those wild card spots. And if you have 2 or 3 really stellar pitchers, you have a good offense and you get hot, you can make it to the World Series. So who knows what happens?
I'm curious, Michael, how closely do you work with, let's say, Jacob Wilkins, who's the play-by-play guy for Binghamton, and the broadcasters at the other levels of the minors and the majors? How closely do you keep in touch with them?
Yeah, I mean, we work closely every single day. I think we're always sharing game notes. We're always sharing roster moves, which is really good. I've been doing some work down in Binghamton with the Binghamton University basketball team during this off season. So I actually grabbed some lunch with Jacob and a coffee earlier this off season, and we just got to catch up a little bit on what's to come for the year, and I got to pick his brain a little bit on some of those players. And during the season, I mean, it is a little tougher just because we're all so intertwined and it's
Right.
in what's going on with our daily schedule. But we're all on each other's email distribution lists when it comes to roster moves and game notes and all of that. So I think that's one way to at least stay in touch and stay up to date with what those teams are doing. And especially last year when Binghamton was making its run, we were definitely keeping a close eye on what was going on there.
Well, let's take it off the field now, switching gears here. The annual Syracuse Mets open house is on Saturday, March 2nd. Can you kind of let us know what that's about, what happens during the event?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the biggest thing that'll happen during that event is that we will have, we'll release our entire promotional schedule. In the past, we had been pretty tight-lipped on every single promotion, but over these last couple of years, what we've been able to do is, we'll and in the next couple of probably days here, next week and a half, we'll probably send out a release about a little bit more information about what our promotional schedule is going forward. But Jason Smorrell will end up giving a talk during that event. You could take a tour of the stadium. So one interesting thing this year is we're going to have some newly renovated areas. That's another, you guys kind of get a little bit of a tidbit there before we release it, but there's going to be a few new areas that fans will be able to sit in, I suppose, during the 2024 season and beyond. And I think one thing that we've been able to do over the last couple of years for this open house, in addition to the promotional reviews and some new merchandise that's going to be available and the stadium tours, we've been able to bring in some former New York Mets players, for a little meet and greet. So this year, you can meet Howard Johnson, who is going to be taking pictures and signing autographs with the team and or with the people that come out during the open house, and he'll be able to give his little preview of what he thinks this 2024 season is going to what's going to happen during this 2024 season.
Well, Hojo was definitely one of my favorite players growing up. I don't know about you guys, but I mean,
Yeah.
he was fantastic back in the day.
Yeah.
I loved him. I loved him so much.
He was my guy when I was a kid.
Yeah. Just one follow up on the event. Can you give us any other sneak peeks as to what's going on? Maybe some food options, new food options.
We are going to have we are going to partner with a local I suppose food outlet that's going to be coming in and taking over one of the stands at the stadium. I can't release that information. Just know
that's all right.
Just know it's going to be that information will be coming out over the next 2 weeks before the open house happens.
Wonderful.
But hey, if you want to come in again, if you come out to the ballpark, it's always, and now the season starts March 29th. It starts, sooner and sooner every single year.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you come out to the ballpark, it's kind of a new breath of fresh air. You get to see some of those areas. You get to take some tours and see some areas that you wouldn't be able to see if you were just at the stadium normally. You'll see the clubhouse and you'll see the batting tunnel and the batting cages and take a look at some of the cooler areas, the press box, of course, which I always love showing to people. So the tours are always one of my more our favorite things to show off to people. But you certainly will be able to, to have Howard Johnson there and to see the new merchandise that we have. It'll be your first opportunity to get some of the new merchandise and new logos for some, things that we're doing there. I think will be really fun for that.
And hopefully the weather cooperates as well.
We hope so, but if it doesn't, we'll have for the season ticket holders. So if you want to, get your season tickets at a time, because actually March 2nd is when single game tickets go on sale. But if you want to make sure you lock up your tickets ahead of time, you can get season tickets. And for our season ticket holders, when they pick up their ticket booklets that day, a lot of times we'll have some coffee and donuts for them. So, to warm people up a little bit. But, the great thing is that even if the weather doesn't cooperate, we have that beautiful Metropolitan Club that folks will be able to watch that Q&A with Jason Smorrell and Howard Johnson and learn more about the season. So that'll be fun.
It is Central New York after all,
Exactly.
You never know. You never know what can happen.
The 29th could be a snow day.
Yes.
May 1st could be a snow day.
Right.
Fair
We've
enough.
had it before. We've had games postponed because of flurries where you couldn't even see the center fielder. I think we're in Buffalo one year, and that was I'm just happy this year that we're going to Charlotte in April. We're going to Charlotte, as opposed to there's been years in the past where we've had last year Durham came to us in April and we went down to Durham in June. Make it make sense. I don't know.
They should always make you guys do the southern trips early in the season.
Right.
You would think.
And by the way, that Charlotte ballpark, if you've never been there, it's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous, right in downtown Charlotte.
Yeah, and Charlotte's one of those cities that's really growing a lot more. I think Charlotte and Nashville are two of the largest growing cities, at least in the eastern part of the United States. So there's definitely a lot to do in Charlotte, and we're looking forward to getting back down there as well.
Mm-hmm. It sounds, Michael, I've been to a couple of the open houses, and I think it's a great way to build a rapport really with Syracuse Mets fans and with the community. Do you find that other minor league teams are doing an open house event like that?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I think some teams do different things during the off season. I mean, we used to do like a hot stove dinner in the past. We did a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2019 when we were the Syracuse Mets. It was the first year we did a meet the team event, and that was before the season. Now we'll do, and last year we did a Meet the Mets event during the season, and I guess another little sneak peek for you guys. We will, the details will be released later on, maybe even during that open house. But it sounds like we are going to be doing another one of those, meet the Mets events where you get to come and get some appetizers and meet the team, get some autographs. So that's something that'll happen during the season. I think a lot of teams do some different things. We like to think we're kind of unique in how we run this open house and being able to bring in a former New York Met great. And that's all part of this great partnership that we have with the New York Mets that helps allow us to have access to guys like this that are, able to come in and interact with fans. Because, as I found out over the last couple of years, I knew there were Mets fans here in Syracuse, but I don't think people realize just how many Mets fans were in Syracuse. You always think there's people with, it's Syracuse and central New York, it's a Yankees town, or even it's a Red Sox town. But no, I think we found it can definitely be a Mets town as well. And the orange and blue plays really, really well here in Syracuse. So yeah, in terms of the offseason stuff, it's cool that we're able to offer this, and that partnership with the Mets has just been awesome in that sense.
When you're evaluating the success of the team, in a AAA team like the Mets, do you strictly go by wins and losses, or do you look at other factors to decide, this was a successful season, whether or not we had a winning record or not?
Yeah, I mean, AAA is so tough, right? Because it's one of those situations where you would love to win, and the one thing that I've loved to hear from Steve Cohen and from David Stearns and up and down the line in this New York Mets organization is that they do want to build that winning culture in AAA, in the minor leagues, because they want their guys to be used to winning. Because when you get up to the major leagues, you want to have that group. Like when I talked to Francisco Alvarez and Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos at the start of last season, and Ronnie Mauricio, they all said, yeah, like we've been able to play together and we've been able to win together. And it's cool that we all started together and now we're all kind of getting up to the majors around the same time. So I think being able to build a winning culture is important. At the same time, at the end of the day, these minor league teams, and AAA in particular, is there to serve at the pleasure of the Major League Ball Club. So if you have if you have guys that are there's times where the Major League, the player development staff, will call down and we'll tell the AAA manager, hey, you can't use this pitcher, and this pitcher because we might need them in New York tomorrow. And, you would love to be. So, you might be sitting there as a fan going, geez, why aren't they using this guy who hasn't pitched in 2 days? Well, it's not because, they are trying to lose the game. It's just they can't use that player. And sometimes development, has to take, precedence over winning. At the same time, you talk to all these guys, they're trying to win. They want to win. Sometimes you're playing with one arm tied behind your back, but so are, a bunch of other teams. So that's just kind of, that's how it works. And I think the one thing that, the Mets have done well, like we were talking about, is build up that depth where you do have, if someone does get called up, whether it's a pitcher or it's a position player, it is next man up. And, last year, it was one of those situations where there were a lot of guys in AAA that were playing here. I think if you asked them, and I did ask them, I said, at the start of the season, did you think you would be here? And they said, look, I thought I was good enough to be here, but we know it's a numbers game, and we didn't think because of how the numbers were working out, we would be here. But because of all the trades, because of how things worked out, some of those guys ended up getting an opportunity at AAA. So it's things like that sometimes you just don't have any control over. But I think this year, if there are guys that need to get called up, if there are injuries in the major leagues, you will have that depth built up. And I think that's the best way, at least in AAA, to win. So, long answer to your question. Yes, guys want to win, but unfortunately, sometimes development, has to take. And if you're a fan of the major league team, would you rather have a great AAA team, or would you rather have a middle of the pack AAA team who knows how to develop players really well and get them ready for the major leagues? And I think that's something we've at least been really, proud to have. And the coaching staff, talking to those guys, they're always proud of the way that they're able to develop these guys, where there's been times we've had more player moves over the last 2 years than we had in, at least in the last maybe 20 years that I had records of in terms of these player moves, and guys who have been with Syracuse and guys being, pushed up to the major leagues and having to fill roles and at least, doing their part to win some games up in the major league. So, that's at least number one.
Do you ever get told in advance about players that might not be able to play, or is it kind of like, a little secret that nobody really ever finds out about until after the game? Basically?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, a lot of times the pitching stuff is it's not necessarily something I would know. I mean, there's that trust that you build with a coaching staff, with the manager, the hitting coach, pitching coach, where they'll give you a heads up, say, hey, this move's going to happen, but please don't say anything until the Mets let us know. And that's, again, another thing that we've had a great relationship with the player development team and the communications team with the New York Mets, where, they'll give us a heads up. Hey, this is going to happen, but, if you could just hold off until we send out the information. Same thing with sometimes we'll have rehabbers come down, and, I know a guy's coming down because he's here, but he's not active. So it's, you just wait until you have the release set up. You just, hey, this guy's, for the media, for the fans or whatnot, depending on who it is. If a Max Scherzer or a Jacob deGrom is going to rehab, sometimes there are cases where we really don't, like, people ask, and I really don't know. I'm not just saying I don't know. I really don't know, and then there's other times you're at least given a heads up, but you don't know all of the details. So it's definitely a mixed bag. I think in terms of the everyday moves, I'm only, a lot of times, if there's things I need to know to have a roster ready, then, our coaching staff is great at getting me that stuff. If there's other moves that, are less pertinent that I have to have a release for, then, I'll just find out with the rest of the folks.
So in addition to the play-by-play duties, what are some of the other responsibilities that you have during your season?
Yeah. So, the play-by-play aspect is really fun. And, that if it was just that, and you were expecting it to be just that, then it's not the job for you, especially in minor league baseball. It's the director of broadcasting and media relations. So writing press releases. A lot of times we'll do press releases, during the off season a few times a month. During the season, it's probably the same thing. We do daily game notes, so we'll update information on the players, stats, info, things like that. We put together a stat pack as well for all of the coaching staffs. One thing that I've been surprised about, and this has just happened from when I first interned when it was the Syracuse Chiefs back in 2014, and Jason Benetti and Kevin Brown were the broadcasters for the team there. But in minor league baseball, I have no idea how this started, who started it, when it started, but we have access to this stat portal. And it's awesome to have all of these, you can look up exit velocity, home run distance, like for individual players, teams, all this stuff. But at some point, it became the job of the broadcasting / media relations people to put together a packet that you would print out of. It would be it's standings for the league, hitting averages for all the teams, pitching stats for all the teams, and then individual stats for the players of your team and the team you're playing. And you print out this packet, which, 8 to 10 pages, maybe more, and you deliver it to both the home team and the visiting team. And I sit here scratching my head. Okay, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, teams didn't have access to all of this stuff, or, it's just easier for the broadcasters and someone in the front office to print it out. But nowadays, these teams have access to more information, even in the minor leagues, than I will even be able to comprehend. And we're still printing out these 10 to 15 packets of stats every single day for these guys. But it's stuff like that, and some coaches over the last couple of years have said, we don't need that. Others who are more old school just love to have the paper copy as opposed to maybe the iPad that they have in front of them. But it's stuff like that we do. And then a lot of the social media stuff, like when we're on the road, my broadcast partner, Evan Stockton, and myself, we do this sponsored video. It's an NBT Bank on the go video. And when we're on the road, find something really interesting about the city we're in, about the ballpark that we're visiting. And we'll do a cool little video about that and post it on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And during the games, we'll be cutting up highlights, and posting those. Like when we're on the road, it's the video call is of whoever the home team is. But, last year when this year will be the same thing. When we have all these top prospects and we have all these names, do you want to hear the opponent's broadcast of a guy saying, Brett Beatty just hit his third home run today, and they're all disappointed? Or do you want to hear the call of the team that the guy plays for? So, we sort of splice that together. So, fans sort of get a little taste of what you might see when these guys eventually make it to New York City. So, to summarize, it's the broadcasting, but we're writing press releases, we're doing game notes, we're doing interviews with the players, we're setting up stuff for the media to talk to players. We're doing these social media videos, we're writing post-game stories, we're cutting audio highlights, we're cutting video highlights, and we're posting it as many places as possible to try and keep people informed and entertained about what's going on, with this team, especially when you have all of these guys.
What led you to be interested in broadcasting?
Yeah, so what's funny is, I didn't even think about broadcasting as something I might want to do as a job until right around 7th grade. My middle school had a television studio that was kind of put in. They would do the video morning announcements. The school went through renovations, and that was part of the renovation. So I sort of got involved, and I would watch SportsCenter growing up and doing this. I said, geez, sports broadcasting might be something I'm interested in. I think I'd want to be maybe a SportsCenter anchor. And, then a few years after that, my 9th grade year, I did a mentor program through my school with Matt Park, who's the voice of the Syracuse Orange, doing, men's basketball and football. And that's when play-by-play really, started to become something that interested me. And I had always wanted to go to Syracuse University just because I would go to all the Syracuse basketball and football games with my family. I was fortunate to have season tickets there with my family. So I'd go to those games growing up. So I got into Newhouse, fortunately, and got involved with all that. But what's funny about everything is, even though I didn't consider broadcasting, it wasn't even on my mind until, seventh grade. Growing up, as early as when I was 3 or 4 years old, I had this little cassette tape, and like a cassette recorder with cassette tapes. I know you guys know what those are, but there might be some people even my age that don't even know what those cassette tapes
Yeah.
are.
Are you saying we're old? What do you mean?
No,
That's exactly it.
Like me.
Yes, I wasn't going to say it, but that's exactly it.
You're just informed. You guys are more informed than everybody else. But I carried around this cassette recorder, and I would record myself playing like backyard football on my computer, or I even have some VHS tapes of some Syracuse football and basketball games that I would just commentate over while the game was playing. And I didn't do it because I saw these play-by-play broadcasters and I was like, oh, I want to be like them. I just enjoyed doing it. I just enjoyed talking about the video games I was playing, or the games I was watching. And it's just, it's interesting how it all came full circle, even though it wasn't at that point that I knew I wanted to do it, but I've kind of just been doing it almost my whole life, and it's worked out for me so far.
Who are the broadcasters who have had the greatest influence on you?
Yeah. So, I mean, Matt Park to start with, I think, getting that first taste of play-by-play, and, he brought me along to, he actually, brought me to a Syracuse Chiefs game, and he brought me to a Syracuse football spring game, and he was, very influential when I was, trying to decide, where to apply to college, and what to do once I got into college, and those things. And then, when I interned with the Syracuse Chiefs, Jason Benetti and Kevin Brown, I mean, that was my first experience broadcasting baseball, and I was fortunate to fall into an awesome situation to learn from two of the best who are doing major league teams right now. Mm-hmm. And that summer, it was after my freshman year of college, so it was 2014, and that year was Jason's final year broadcasting for the team because he had gotten a job with ESPN. So he actually left, I believe it was the end of July. So it was probably like August and September. Jason wasn't there. He was getting ready to do ESPN football. So, and there were some of our games, the Syracuse Chiefs games, that were on TV. So they actually needed somebody to broadcast on the radio while Kevin Brown slid over to television. So I got the opportunity as a 18, 19-year-old, just out of freshman year of college. I got the opportunity to broadcast AAA baseball. And I'll look back, I'll listen back to those games, even like the following summer when I was listening back to those games, I was like, man, how did anybody ever let me on the air? But, I was fortunate to learn a lot from Jason and Kevin. And it's great to be able to call them not just, mentors, but great friends, even to this day. But I'd say those two and Matt, and, I've had great broadcast partners as well. My first full season in baseball was with John Nolan in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. And I worked with Eric Galanti and now Evan Stockton. And just to be able to work with, all of those guys, you always learn something from the people that you broadcast alongside, especially in baseball, since you're doing, nowadays 150 games in 169 days, I think it is. So you definitely learn a lot from the guys that you're with. But yeah, those are the ones that I've definitely been able to reach out to. And I'm still, sending my stuff out to, the New York Mets broadcasters and broadcasters, elsewhere. Hey, here's a half inning of mine. Do you mind sending me some advice? And, you can never get too much feedback from people.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that there's you and Jason Benetti and Kevin Brown, Robert Ford, who does games for the Astros. They're all Syracuse University graduates. And I know I'm leaving. You have the other folks as well, of course, Bob Costas and Sean McDonough, and just so many other people. But what is it? What does it mean to you to be a part of that heritage of Syracuse University broadcasters, making their way into baseball?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not lost on me, the lineage and the history that is there, not just going to Syracuse University, but to be working in a broadcast booth. I think if you probably look at the minor league teams that have sent the most people to the major leagues, I think it's, Syracuse and then Pawtucket and now Worcester, the AAA team in Syracuse, the AAA team that's either, it's for the Red Sox, wherever it may be. They used to be in Pawtucket, now they're in Worcester. But yeah, I mean, the amount of people that have been in Syracuse and gone on, when you're in that broadcast booth, there's just an expectation, no matter who's there, that it's going to be a major league type of broadcast. And, I like to think that I've been able to do a great job, and Evan and I work really well together. And, we're fortunate where, we're able to interact with fans, and it's really fun to be. I'm walking to the concourse in Scranton, and I got a Mets fan saying, "Hey, I've got the MLB TV package," and I was able to, the New York Mets had an off day, but I, decided to turn on a Syracuse game, and he just, he recognized us because we do our little pregame spiel on camera, and he said, "Hey, you guys do a really good job," and that's actually happened a couple different places, and to get emails from parents of and family members of players that both play for us and that play against us, because again, the video broadcast is for the team, whoever's home. So, if you're the parent or family member of a player who's, a visiting team, they're very likely watching our broadcast. So, obviously we're pro New York Mets, but we at least try and be fair with, and tell the stories of all those other guys as well. So, we try to do the best job we can, and it's great to be able to try and uphold that lineage, but also have all of those guys to be able to reach out to. So I can send, a text or an email or make a phone call to a Jason Benetti or a Kevin Brown, or, guys like Sean McDonough. If you have the contact info, they're willing when they have the time, because those guys are all busy. But if you send them a note, they'll be willing to give you a response. And I think it just speaks to that group and sort of the family and culture that's been built.
How did you land that first job with Fort Wayne?
I've been really fortunate. My career, and you put yourself in a good position. Like I think you can put yourself in a position to be, maybe lucky isn't the right word. Sometimes you make your own luck, I guess is the best way to put it. So honestly, doing that internship, like all of the baseball jobs I've gotten really came down to that first internship I had in 2014 with Jason and Kevin. So learning from those guys. 2015, I worked on the Cape Cod for the Cape Cod Baseball League, and there were two Syracuse students who were a year ahead of me who said, "Hey, we saw that you were with the Syracuse Chiefs and you did some good work there. We've always had a Syracuse guy with the Falmouth Commodores and the Cape Cod Baseball League. Would you, is that something you'd be interested in?" So then I go to the Cape in 2015. One of those broadcasters got a job with the Auburn Doubledays when they were the short season affiliate for the Washington Nationals. So he did that in 2015 while I was on the Cape. He left that job. So then in 2016, I was with the Auburn Doubledays. And then 2017 was my senior year, and I had set up my class schedule so that I could graduate early if I needed to, because I knew, short season baseball was great because it starts in June and it ends in, around September, early September at least. So, you don't have you don't have to miss much class. But full season baseball, as you know, starts in March and April and still goes through September. So because it started so early, I at least wanted to set things up that I could leave early. And but I still wasn't sure. I didn't know, which teams were going to be available and what was going to happen. And I was fortunate one day in probably December, I got a phone call from John Nolan, who's a Syracuse grad and is the play-by-play voice of the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. And he called me and he said, "Hey, this is John, and I'm, the broadcaster for the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. And, I saw you had worked with Jason and Kevin and you've done some good work. And I was wondering if, this might be something that interested, that you'd be willing to come out here." So I had, conversations with him. So I was just fortunate to, hopefully have done good work and built up a good enough name that someone would be willing to, sort of take a chance by reaching out to me to come out there. And I learned a lot from John and learned a lot. I'm thankful for the Tin Caps and for John for reaching out, because I like to think I would have done some baseball job that following summer, but some people are reaching out in November and December, and it was probably getting close to the end of December and into January, and I was still contemplating what I was going to do in terms of whether I would do full season baseball or not. And I happened to get a phone call. So again, one of those situations where like maybe it landed in my lap, but at least I was, for people who are interested in this industry, when you're at these other jobs, make sure you're doing a good job to build up that reputation that someone would be willing to, call you and take a chance on you. And, I was fortunate after that Kevin Brown was working with Eric Galante, and Kevin then, after the 2000 or maybe towards the end of the 2017 season, he got a job with ESPN. So then going into 2018, Eric Galante was the number one guy in Syracuse. He was looking for a number two. And then I reached out to Eric, knowing that position was open, and said, hey, I'm from Syracuse, and I knew Eric from school. So it wasn't a hard, connection to make, but was fortunate that the job opened in Syracuse, and I was the one that got it. And, everything else has been history, I suppose.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best and continued success in your play-by-play career. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, guys. And looking forward to talking more Mets baseball as we get into the season, and we'll see how things fall this year.
LGSM.
And there we go.
And that was Syracuse Mets play-by-play guy Michael Tricarico joining us on the Throwing Bagels podcast. And you know what? Now that I think about it, we've been blessed as Mets fans to have tremendous play-by-play broadcasters. And really, Syracuse is not that far behind. They really do take the same approach because of the stream of SU grads that have come through there. They are taught to be professional. Mm-hmm. And so it does. You kind of see that now, that willingness to call it like you see it, and to be respectful of the opponent, and to just overall just call a good game trickles down to the Syracuse level too, and places beyond that.
Yeah, and him speaking about Syracuse grads that end up there, and unfortunately, when we were in school, we didn't do any baseball games because we couldn't do it. So, I hope the guys from Oswego can start to maybe push their way down there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it for this edition of the Throwing Bagels podcast. You can check us out online, throwingbagels.com. Email us, throwingbagelspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chris.
So long.
Good night.
See you later.